Picture this: two legends, one dojo, and a challenge that would shatter everything. It's 1987. Jean-Claude Van Damme is hungry, starving really, for recognition. He's been kicking down doors in Hollywood, literally and figuratively, trying to prove he belongs among the greats. And then there's Chuck Norris, the quiet titan, the man who doesn't need to prove anything to anyone because his reputation speaks in whispers that echo like thunder. Van Damme makes a decision that will haunt him for years. He walks into Chuck's dojo in Los Angeles, cameras in tow, ego blazing like a supernova, and issues a challenge. Not just any challenge, a public one. A spectacle designed to elevate himself by standing on the shoulders of a giant. What happens next isn't just a fight. It's a lesson, a humbling, a moment where raw talent meets seasoned wisdom and ego meets its inevitable end. This is the story of how Jean-Claude Van Damme challenged Chuck Norris and how the result changed him forever. Jean-Claude Van Damme was a man possessed. In the spring of 1987, he was 36 years old, carved from marble and ambition. His body was a weapon he'd honed since childhood in Brussels, Belgium, karate tournaments, kickboxing championships, ballet training that gave him the flexibility to kick a man's head clean off his shoulders. He'd come to America with $3,000 and a dream that burned hotter than the California sun. But Hollywood wasn't interested in dreams. Hollywood wanted names: Stallone, Schwarzenegger, Norris. Van Damme had landed small roles. Nothing substantial, nothing that would make people remember his name. He'd sleep in his car some nights, parked outside Gold's Gym in Venice Beach, wake up at dawn to train, then pound the pavement looking for his break. He was good. No, he was exceptional. His spinning kicks could decapitate a street lamp. His splits were legendary even then. But none of it mattered if no one was watching. The rejection ate at him. Every audition where casting directors looked past him. Every callback that never came. Every time he demonstrated his skills only to hear, "We'll let you know," in that dismissive Hollywood tone that really meant, "Don't call us." He'd watched Chuck Norris movies in dollar theaters, studying every move, every technique, every moment of screen presence. Chuck had made the transition look effortless, from tournament champion to action star, from nobody to legend. There had to be a way to accelerate that journey. There had to be a shortcut. That's when the idea took root. Dark, intoxicating, dangerous. If I can't become a legend on my own, he thought, staring at his reflection in a gym mirror, sweat dripping down his temples, muscles screaming from another brutal training session, I'll become one by defeating a legend. Chuck Norris. The name carried weight like a stone tablet bearing ancient lore. Chuck had been there, done everything. 6-time world karate champion, action star. The man who'd trained with Bruce Lee, who'd fought alongside the greatest martial artists of his generation. He'd transitioned from martial arts competitions to Hollywood with a grace that made it look effortless, starring in films like Missing in Action, The Octagon, Lone Wolf McQuade. The television series Walker, Texas Ranger was still in his future, but everyone knew Chuck Norris was untouchable. More importantly, Chuck ran a dojo in Los Angeles, a sacred space where he trained, taught, and maintained the discipline that had defined his entire life. Van Damme saw opportunity. He saw a shortcut to relevance. He saw his name in headlines. New martial arts star challenges Chuck Norris. He spent weeks planning it, lying awake in his cramped apartment, the sounds of sirens and city life bleeding through thin walls. He'd bring cameras, friendly contacts he'd made at low-budget production companies who owed him favors. He'd make it public. He'd challenge Chuck to a friendly sparring match, film it, and let the world see Jean-Claude Van Damme go toe-to-toe with a living legend. Win or lose, people would know his name. But in his heart, wrapped in layers of justification and desperate hunger, Van Damme believed he could win. He was younger, faster, more flexible. Chuck was 47 by then, still formidable, sure, but past his prime, right? Time was Van Damme's ally. Youth versus experience. The new generation versus the old guard. Van Damme's ego whispered sweet promises. You're the future. He's the past. This is your moment. This is how stars are born. He didn't stop to consider what he was really doing. Didn't pause to think about respect, about protocol, about the unwritten rules that govern how warriors treat one another. He was too hungry, too blind, too desperate to see that he was about to make the biggest mistake of his life. The day arrived like judgment. Van Damme pulled up to Chuck Norris's dojo in Sherman Oaks in a borrowed van filled with 3 camera operators and enough audacity to fill the Grand Canyon. The building was unassuming, a single-story structure with large windows, the words Chuck Norris Karate Studios painted in simple black letters above the door. Inside, students were training. The sound of ki-ice, sharp exhales accompanying strikes, punctuated the air. The smell of canvas mats and decades of discipline hung heavy. This was a temple, a place where respect wasn't just taught, it was breathed. Van Damme walked in, wearing tight workout pants and a tank top that showcased his physique. His hair was perfect. His expression was cocky confidence masking desperate need. Chuck Norris was teaching a class of teenagers, demonstrating a blocking technique with the patience of someone who'd explained the same movement 10,000 times and would gladly explain it 10,000 more. He was wearing a simple jai, his black belt worn and frayed at the edges, the mark of a belt that had been earned through blood, sweat, and years of dedication. He looked up when Van Damme entered. Their eyes met. Chuck's expression didn't change. Calm, neutral, observant. "Mr. Norris," Van Damme said, his accent thick, his voice carrying across the dojo with theatrical projection. "I am Jean-Claude Van Damme. I am a martial artist like you. I have come to challenge you to a sparring match, to test my skills against the best." The dojo went silent. 15 teenage students froze mid-movement, their eyes swinging between the stranger and their teacher. The camera operators filed in behind Van Damme, equipment hoisted on shoulders, red recording lights already blinking. Chuck took a slow breath. He bowed to his students, a gesture of temporary dismissal, and walked toward Van Damme with measured steps. He wasn't a large man, standing 5'10", but his presence filled the space like gravity. "You want to challenge me?" Chuck said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," Van Damme replied, chin raised. "The world wants to see if the new generation can match the old. It would be good for both of us. Publicity, respect, a test between warriors." Chuck glanced at the cameras, then back at Van Damme. Something flickered behind his eyes. Not anger, but something deeper. Disappointment, perhaps. Recognition of what this really was. "This isn't how it's done," Chuck said quietly. "You don't walk into someone's school with cameras and demand a fight. That's not martial arts. That's not respect." "Are you afraid?" Van Damme shot back, his ego overriding his common sense. The great Chuck Norris, afraid of a younger fighter? The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Chuck's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. His students had never seen their teacher challenged like this, disrespected in his own dojo, provoked with cameras recording every word. "I'm not afraid," Chuck said, his voice still controlled, still measured. "But you need to understand something. Martial arts isn't about proving yourself to cameras. It's about discipline, honor, respect, things you're not showing right now." Van Damme's face flushed. He'd expected resistance maybe, but not this calm dismissal. Not this quiet authority that made him feel like a child throwing a tantrum. "Then prove it," Van Damme pressed, "or everyone will think you're just an old man hiding behind philosophy." The words hung in the air like a slap. Chuck looked at Van Damme for a long moment. Then he did something unexpected. He smiled, small, sad. "Okay," Chuck said. "You want a lesson? I'll give you one." They cleared the center of the dojo. Chuck's students sat along the walls, silent witnesses to what was about to unfold. The camera operators positioned themselves at 3 angles, capturing everything. Van Damme stretched elaborately, splits, high kicks that brushed the ceiling, theatrical displays of flexibility that would look incredible on film. Chuck simply stood in a ready stance, hands loose at his sides, weight balanced. He didn't stretch, didn't showboat. He just waited with the patience of someone who'd been in this exact position 1,000 times before. "Ready when you are," Chuck said. Van Damme exploded forward. His opening combination was textbook beautiful, a jab cross followed by a spinning back kick that would have taken a normal person's head off. Chuck wasn't there. He'd shifted 6 inches to the left, the kick whistling past his ear, Van Damme's heel missing by a margin so small it might as well have been a mile. Van Damme reset, bounced on his toes through another combination. Punches, elbows, a jumping knee. Chuck deflected with minimal movement, his blocks economical and precise. Not wasting energy, not showing off, just moving like water around rocks. To the cameras, it looked competitive. Van Damme was attacking, Chuck was defending. But to anyone who understood fighting, to Chuck's students, to the camera operators who'd filmed enough action scenes to recognize real skill, the truth was obvious. Chuck was toying with him. Van Damme threw a spinning hook kick, his specialty, the move that would later become his signature in films. Chuck stepped inside it, past the arc of power, and tapped Van Damme's supporting leg with his foot. Just a touch, barely any force. And Van Damme stumbled, his balance broken. Frustration crept into Van Damme's movements. He attacked harder, faster, abandoning technique for aggression. A flurry of strikes, kicks, spinning attacks that would have overwhelmed any normal opponent. Chuck's expression never changed. Block, evade, sidestep, counter. Not to hurt, just to touch. A tap to the ribs, a finger touch to the solar plexus, a brush against the jaw. Every touch was a message. I could have hit you there. I could have ended this. Van Damme was breathing hard now, sweat pouring down his face. His attacks became desperate, wild. He threw everything he had, every technique he'd spent his life perfecting, and none of it landed clean. Then Chuck decided the lesson needed to escalate. Van Damme threw another spinning back kick, all his weight behind it. Chuck caught the leg mid-spin, just grabbed it out of the air like plucking fruit from a tree, and swept Van Damme's standing leg. Van Damme crashed to the mat, the impact driving the air from his lungs. He lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling, the fluorescent lights blurring through the sweat in his eyes. The cameras captured everything, his humiliation, his defeat, the moment his ego met reality. Chuck extended a hand to help him up. Van Damme stared at that hand, calloused, scarred, the hand of someone who'd earned every lesson he taught. And something inside him cracked. Chuck pulled Van Damme to his feet, and instead of resuming the fight, he spoke. "Come here," Chuck said, gesturing to the side of the mat. "Sit with me for a minute." Van Damme, still gasping, his pride shattered into pieces around him, followed numbly. They sat on a bench. The cameras kept rolling, but the atmosphere had changed. This wasn't a fight anymore. It was something else. "You're talented," Chuck said. "I can see that. Your technique is impressive. You've clearly trained hard your entire life." Van Damme looked down at his hands, unable to meet Chuck's eyes. "But you're missing something," Chuck continued, "and it's the most important thing." "What?" Van Damme asked, his voice barely a whisper. "You're fighting for the wrong reasons." Chuck leaned back, his eyes distant, remembering. "When I was younger, your age, maybe younger, I was like you, hungry, desperate to prove myself. I fought in tournaments because I needed people to see me, to validate me, to tell me I was worth something." He paused, the weight of memory settling on his shoulders. "I won a lot, 6 world championships, fought the best fighters in the world, beat men who were supposed to be unbeatable. And you know what I learned?" Van Damme shook his head. "That all those wins, all that recognition, didn't fill the emptiness inside me, because I was fighting for ego, for pride, for external validation. And those things are bottomless pits. You can pour everything into them and never be satisfied." Chuck looked at Van Damme directly, his gaze gentle but unwavering. "I didn't find peace until I understood that martial arts isn't about proving you're better than someone else. It's about proving you're better than you were yesterday. It's about discipline, respect, humility. It's about using your strength to protect, not to dominate, to teach, not to conquer." He gestured to his students, still sitting quietly against the walls. "These kids, they don't train with me because I'm a champion. They train with me because I give a damn about who they become as people, not just as fighters. That's the difference between being a martial artist and being a fighter. One is about ego. One is about service." Van Damme felt something breaking inside him. All the justifications he'd built up, all the rationalizations for why he'd done this, crumbled under the weight of Chuck's words. "I embarrassed you today," Chuck said. "Not because I wanted to, but because you needed to learn this lesson. You came into my school with cameras and demands and disrespect, and you got exactly what that deserved. But I'm not angry with you. I'm disappointed. Because you're better than this. You just don't know it yet. Tears welled in Van Damme's eyes. He blinked them back, but they came anyway. What do I do? He asked, his voice breaking. Chuck smiled. You start over. You train for the right reasons. You build yourself not on the destruction of others' reputations, but on the foundation of your own character. And when you get your chance, and you will get your chance, you'll be ready, not just as a fighter, but as a man. Van Damme left the dojo that day a different person. The cameras had captured everything: his defeat, his humiliation, his breakdown. His plan to use Chucknorris to elevate himself had backfired spectacularly. The footage existed, and part of him wanted to bury it, destroy it, pretend it never happened. But Chuck's words echoed in his mind, relentless and true. You're fighting for the wrong reasons. Van Damme spent the next weeks in brutal self-examination. He watched the footage alone in his apartment, forcing himself to see what he'd become. The arrogance, the disrespect, the desperate hunger that had made him blind to everything martial arts was supposed to teach. He thought about his childhood in Brussels, the bullies who'd beaten him up until he learned to fight back, the years in karate dojos, learning discipline alongside devastating kicks, the ballet training his father had insisted on, teaching him grace and flexibility, his mother's encouragement, his father's stern guidance. Somewhere along the way, in the chaos of Hollywood rejection, he'd forgotten why he started. He'd forgotten that martial arts had saved him, given him structure, taught him that strength wasn't just about muscles and speed. He'd let Hollywood's rejection twist him into something ugly. But it wasn't too late to change. Van Damme made a decision. He called the camera operators and asked them to shelve the footage. Not to destroy it, but to keep it private. That footage was his lesson, his reminder of what happened when ego drove the car instead of discipline. Then he started training again. Not for cameras, not for Hollywood, not to prove anything to anyone, just to be better. He trained harder than ever before, but with a different mindset. Every morning, before the sun rose over Los Angeles, he'd run through the empty streets thinking about Chuck's words. Every kick, every punch, every movement became a meditation on why he was doing this. He started teaching free classes at community centers, working with kids who reminded him of himself. Poor, hungry, looking for something to hold on to. Kids from broken homes, kids being bullied, kids who needed to know they could be strong without being cruel. He taught them technique, yes, but more importantly, he taught them respect, discipline, the same lessons he'd ignored and now desperately needed to relearn. He stopped name-dropping, stopped trying to force his way into auditions by intimidation or spectacle. He showed up on time. He was polite to everyone, from directors to production assistants. He worked hard, took direction, and slowly, painfully slowly, started to build a reputation, not as a troublemaker, but as a professional. He worked, he waited, he grew. And then, in 1988, he got the call that would change everything. Bloodsport, a low-budget martial arts film about a secret fighting tournament. The lead role needed someone who could actually fight, someone who could do the splits, someone whose kicks looked real because they were real. Van Damme auditioned, not with arrogance or demands, but with humility and skill. He demonstrated his abilities without bragging. He read lines without demanding changes. He treated everyone in the room with respect. He got the part. The film was a sleeper hit, showcasing everything Van Damme had to offer. His physical abilities, his charisma, his vulnerability. Audiences fell in love with him, not because he'd destroyed someone else's reputation, but because he'd earned his place through talent and perseverance. He started getting more roles. Kickboxer, Universal Soldier, Time Cop. His career skyrocketed, and with each film, he remembered Chuck's lesson. He treated crew members with respect. He helped younger actors. He used his platform to talk about discipline, humility, and the real purpose of martial arts. Years later, Van Damme would cross paths with Chuck again. At an industry event, both of them established stars. Van Damme approached nervously, unsure of his reception. Chuck saw him and smiled, that same small, knowing smile. "I've been watching your career," Chuck said. "I'm proud of you." Van Damme's eyes welled up. "I never thanked you properly. For that day, for the lesson. You thanked me by becoming who you are now, Chuck replied. That's all the thanks anyone needs. They embraced, two warriors, two legends, connected by a moment of humiliation that had become transformation. The story of what happened in Chuck Norris's dojo that day became legend in martial arts circles, though the footage never went public during their lifetimes. Van Damme would occasionally reference it in interviews, always with humility, always framing it as the most important lesson he'd ever learned. He'd tell young fighters, "I once challenged Chuck Norris because I was stupid and desperate. He could have destroyed me, humiliated me in front of cameras. Instead, he taught me. That's the difference between a fighter and a master." Chuck, true to form, rarely spoke about it. When asked, he'd simply say, "Jean-Claude is a good man and a talented martial artist. We all make mistakes when we're young. What matters is what you learn from them." The lesson reverberated through Van Damme's entire career. In the 1990s, at the height of his fame, when ego could have consumed him again, he remembered that day on the mat. He remembered what it felt like to be humbled by someone who had every right to destroy him, but chose to teach him instead. He started working with troubled kids, using martial arts to teach discipline and self-respect. He spoke openly about his own failures and struggles, his brief period of substance abuse, his failed marriages, his battles with ego and insecurity. By being vulnerable, by admitting his mistakes, he became more than an action star. He became someone people could relate to, someone who understood that strength isn't about never falling down. It's about getting back up and learning from the fall. Van Damme established scholarship programs for underprivileged youth to train in martial arts. He visited schools, speaking not about his movie career, but about the importance of respect, discipline, and choosing the right path, even when the wrong path looks easier. Chuck continued his quiet work, teaching, mentoring, using his platform to promote respect and discipline. He never needed to brag about the day he'd humbled a younger fighter. His reputation spoke for itself, not through self-promotion, but through the lives he'd touched and the example he'd set. His students went on to become teachers themselves, carrying forward the lessons about respect and humility. The dojo in Sherman Oaks became a pilgrimage site for serious martial artists, a place where you learn that true strength comes from character, not from beating opponents. In 2012, Van Damme did something unexpected. He released a public statement and video tribute to Chuck Norris, explicitly telling the story of their encounter and thanking Chuck for the lesson that had shaped his entire career. "I was arrogant," Van Damme said to the camera, his voice steady, his eyes clear. "I thought I could use someone else's reputation to build my own. Chuck Norris could have humiliated me, could have hurt me, could have ruined any chance I had in this industry. Instead, he taught me what martial arts really means. He showed me that real strength is knowing when not to fight, when to teach, when to show mercy. Everything good in my career, everything I've built, started with that lesson. Thank you, Chuck, for seeing something in me worth saving." The video went viral. Millions watched. Comments poured in from martial artists, from fans, from people who'd never even heard of the encounter, but were moved by the raw honesty and humility. Chuck's response was classic Chuck. He simply said, "Jean-Claude is a class act. I'm honored to call him my friend." 2 sentences. No grandstanding. No ego. Just genuine respect between two men who understood that the greatest victories aren't won with fists, but with character. The impact of their story extended beyond just the two men involved. Young martial artists around the world began to understand that true mastery wasn't about collecting trophies or dominating opponents. It was about the person you became in the process. Dojos started emphasizing character development alongside physical technique. Instructors shared the story as a teaching tool about respect, humility, and the dangers of ego-driven ambition. MMA fighters, boxers, and martial artists from every discipline referenced the story when discussing what it means to be a true champion. The story became a parable, a cautionary tale, and ultimately a redemption arc that inspired millions. This story isn't really about a fight, it's about a choice. Jean-Claude Van Damme chose to walk into that dojo with cameras and ego, seeking to build himself by standing on another man's reputation. It was a mistake born of desperation, of hunger, of forgetting what martial arts had taught him. Chucknorris chose to respond not with anger or public humiliation, but with a lesson. He could have destroyed Van Damme, physically, professionally, permanently. Instead, he chose to teach. He chose to see past the arrogance to the potential underneath. He chose mercy over dominance, wisdom over vengeance, and in that choice, both men became greater. Van Damme's ego was ended that day, not destroyed, but transformed. The desperate, hungry fighter became a humble, respected martial artist and actor. He learned that true strength doesn't come from proving you're better than others, but from constantly improving yourself. That real respect is earned through character, not conquest. Chuck's legend grew, not because he defeated a younger challenger, but because of how he defeated him. With grace, with wisdom, with the quiet confidence of someone who has nothing to prove. The moral of this story is ancient, but eternally relevant. Those who have nothing to prove are the most powerful. The quietest warriors often carry the deepest strength. And real mastery isn't about dominating others. It's about elevating them, teaching them, helping them become better than they were. Van Damme came to that dojo seeking validation through someone else's defeat. He left with something infinitely more valuable, a lesson that would shape the rest of his life. Sometimes the greatest gifts come wrapped in humiliation. Sometimes the hardest lessons are the ones we need most. Chucknorris didn't just win a sparring match that day, he won a soul. He took someone who was lost, angry, and desperate and showed him a better path. That's not just martial arts mastery, that's human mastery. In a world that constantly tells us to prove ourselves, to dominate, to crush our competition, these two legends remind us of a deeper truth. The greatest victory is helping someone else become better. The strongest people are those who use their power to teach, not to destroy. And the most profound respect isn't demanded. It's earned through humility, discipline, and the quiet knowledge that you have nothing to prove. Jean-Claude Van Damme challenged Chuck Norris. The result ended his ego and gave birth to his character. And in the end, that made all the difference. Because the real fight isn't against others, it's against the worst parts of ourselves. And the real victory is becoming someone worth respecting, not because the world saw you win, but because you earned it in the quiet moments when no one was watching. The legacy of that day continues to inspire. It reminds us that mercy is more powerful than vengeance, that teaching is more valuable than destroying, and that the truest measure of a warrior isn't how many fights they've won, it's how many lives they've changed for the better. Chuck and Jean-Claude both understood, in the end, that legends aren't born from defeating others. Legends are born from defeating your own demons, from choosing growth over ego, from using your strength to lift others up rather than knock them down. That's the lesson that transformed one man's career and cemented another's legacy. That's the story that continues to echo through dojos, gyms, and hearts around the world. Because in the end, the most powerful weapon any warrior can possess isn't a devastating kick or an unbreakable defense. It's wisdom, humility, and the courage to choose teaching over triumph.